Hey, everybody. Welcome to the green room of DisrupTV. We've been talking about pickleball strategies. We're not sure exactly what we're going to do with that on the show, but thank you for all being here. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Vala Ashar. He's over here, our amazing producer, Elle. And of course, I'm Ray Wong. We're happy to have here. We've got some amazing guests. And as usual, we obviously introduce everybody in the green room in reverse order. We'll start with William, and we'll go to Don, and then we'll head on to Mike and Rahul. So William, tell us where you're calling in from. What are we talking about today?
I'm calling in from Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're talking about our new book, Bridgebuilders, and also done a lot of work over the last 25 years on digital transformation of government. So you could maybe get into that too.
Very, very cool. I'm looking forward to that. Don, welcome. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Good afternoon, and welcome from Austin, Texas. I'm talking to you from downtown, and interested today in talking about the strategies not only of trying to find ways of making government work effectively through bridge builders, but also how we can redefine accountability to make sure it fits well for all the challenges we got for the 21st century.
Very, very cool. It's ATX. He's keeping it weird. All right, Mike, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm coming in from a small town in Australia called Brighton, and we're going to be talking about, I guess, cloud efficiency and FinOps, especially when it regards to data efficiency.
Very cool. Thanks for coming in from so far down under. And Rahul, where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from Silicon Valley, Mountain View, California. Happy Friday, everybody. Excited to be here. I'm going to be talking about, cloud efficiency and AI efficiency and AI safety, more from a perspective of enterprise adoption.
Very, very cool. Well, from Bayside to Mountain View, we've got it covered coast to coast. Thank you very much. And of course, we'll turn it back to you, Elle. Let's kick off the show.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter, X, at DisrupTV Show. Send us your questions, and Ray, myself, and our guests will do our best to answer them live during the next hour. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Ray's a regular television business and tech news contributor on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, and CNBC. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top features to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wong, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. Here with Vala Ashar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence. His new book, Boundless, which you all have to get, is a new mindset for unlimited business success, and it's going to be available this September and can be pre-ordered today on Amazon and wherever books are sold. But it's not about that. It's our amazing capabilities. And if you think about what Vala does, he's got executives around the world paying attention to every one of his insightful tweets or posts that we're calling them now. Of course, we're not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce. You can find him on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and writing insightful analyses on ZDNet. We've got amazing guests for this show. We've got 4, and we're going to kick off with 2. So who do we have, Vala? And what are we talking about?
It's our privilege to have 2 amazing experts as our first segment. Rahul Ponnala, co-founder, CEO of Granica. Rahul is co-founder and CEO of Granica, the world's first AI efficiency platform, which is on a mission to make AI affordable, accessible, and safe to use. Prior to founding Granica, he served as director of storage and integration at Pure Storage. Rahul's dedication to technological innovation extends beyond Granica. He helps shape the future of cloud financial management as a governing board member of the FinOps Foundation under the Linux Foundation. A multidisciplinary academic, Rahul's research spans mathematics, information theory, machine learning, and distributed systems. He holds a portfolio of patents in computational statistics and data compression. As an angel investor, Rahul supports emerging tech startups pushing boundaries in AI, robotics, and machines and medicine. Welcome, Rahul, to DisrupTV.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great to have you. In addition, we have Mike Fuller, CTO at the FinOps Foundation, a nonprofit program under the Linux Foundation. Mike's responsibilities include the best practices and content produced by the foundation, along with leading the APJ community. Mike has co-authored both editions of the Cloud FinOps book, published by O'Reilly Media, alongside J.R. Storment, widely regarded as the FinOps book. Mike recently became the steering committee chair alongside members from Google, Microsoft, and Focus Project, working on open specifications for cloud billing data. Previously to the FinOps Foundation, Mike was a principal engineer at Atlassian for over 10 years, where he formed a dedicated FinOps team, including data engineers, analysts, and FinOps practitioners. Welcome, Mike, to DisrupTV.
Thank you.
Thanks for dialing in from literally the other side of the world.
Yeah.
He's ahead of us, right? So he's already seen the future. He's seen the future. But hey, gentlemen, welcome. Hey, the question to you guys first is, what is FinOps? And then we should really talk about where FinOps strategy comes into place, especially given where we are with cloud cost, overages, tiering, dedicated, not dedicated instances, cloud management, people moving stuff back and repatriating cloud. It's crazy out there. But let's talk about FinOps strategy first. What is it? And of course, why are people jumping into this?
Yeah, so I think the big thing about FinOps is it's a cultural change within the organization and the way that everybody is approaching their cloud spend. The key here is it's not really just about saving money. It's about making the right decisions for the organization around the cloud usage and trying to make those near real-time decisions around data-driven insights about the value you're going to get from the cloud usage you have. And so basically trying to get the most value for every dollar you spend in cloud.
Can you expand a bit more on the culture piece?
Yeah, so I think that we have one of the core principles is around that everybody's taking ownership of their cloud spend, and so in a world of the data center, you have these upfront sort of conversations with finance and procurement teams to sort of align on what you're spending, and then after that sort of conversation has occurred, it's very low impact the decisions that are made daily on the consumption of that equipment. But when you move into the cloud, those conversations sort of stop happening because you're more freely able to make these micro exchanges with your cloud service provider, and so quickly the company sort of gets a little bit out of sync about what's been expected to be spended to where where their expenditure sort of heads, and so you're trying to bring to a world where there's these thoughts about what we're going to get for these cloud resources and whether or not it is good value for the business, and how do we make those teams that have typically operated in silos start to actually collaborate together on a more frequent basis to be aligned across the business. And so that cultural change is that real thinking about each other, about the overall goal of the business, not just your individual sort of area of expertise.
So Rahul, go ahead, please.
Real quick. Let me jump in real quick. Mike, terrific to have you, again over here and chatting with you. If you really think about it, right, maybe the last decade spoiled us a little bit, right, as enterprises, where for every problem, right, mostly you're throwing money at it, right, and you're hoping that, the problem will be magically solved. Right. So this notion of efficiency was not top of mind. The notion of growth was top of mind. Right. Sure. Now we are in the age where you have to think about efficient growth. Right. You cannot just basically grow for the sake of growing. You also have to think about efficiency. And what does efficiency really mean? It goes back to the fundamental principles of unit economics, right? I don't want to spend $10 to earn $1, right? That's the way where I can actually turn the company down. How do you actually spend $2, make $4, or make multiple factors of those dollars that you're spending? That's efficiency, right? And how do you do that? I would say is a core principle, or one of the core principles of FinOps, right? In order to actually spend the money that you're spending, in order to actually derive the value that you're deriving, and in order to move the business forward and actually provide impact to the world, what are the principles that you have to take as a culture, as a company culture, and embed that across various different disciplines within a company, right? That's, I would say, the core of FinOps and FinOps Foundation, and what Mike and the team with J.R. Starment and others, including myself, are trying to do. And
so this is beyond COO, CFO guiding principles. These are guiding principles for all line of business owners, anyone investing in cloud, to really think about this collectively in terms of what you talked about, a decade of efficiency.
I would completely agree with that statement, right? And one way to sort of also think about this is, again, going back to first principles. Again, I'm a mathematician, so I like to think from first principles perspective. And if you really think about it, right, this whole notion of shift left, right, which is kind of grown into hyperbolic proportions, right? It's not a really radical mindset change, right? Shift left has always been the case. Like if you really think about debugging a problem, right? You're writing a code, you're writing program. If you actually discover the bug in production, it's going to impact the most. So how early can you actually detect it, right? What are the tools that you need to build in order for developers, as they're writing the code, they can actually debug, the code that they're actually writing and things of that nature, right? What I hope and what I think is going to basically materialize in terms of efficiency is bringing that shift left strategy to this FinOps, organization principles as well. So what does that mean? So when I'm writing code, when I'm writing a line of code, or when I'm writing a function call, right, I don't necessarily just have to think about performance and latency and how efficient that piece of code is, but I also have to think about what the cost impact of this would look like, right? So I would say, I think those are the principles that, essentially derive these line of business owners to take essentially those things and cultivate that mindset shift across the organization. So it's no longer, I would say, a CEO, CFO, COO mandate. It's a complete cultural shift of not just top down, but bottoms up as well.
So who's the exec sponsor? Who's the exec sponsor that Granica and FinOps Foundation? Who is it? Is it the CIO? Is it the CEO? Is it the head of DevOps? Who's the person that you partner with to bring this knowledge and this set of guiding principles so that everyone understands the unit cost and the economics of maximizing efficiency?
We see FinOps teams sit under either the CIO, CTO, or the CFO side of the business, but there's a definite need for a dotted line reporting across the two, because you're basically impacting both sides of the house in this practice. And I guess to the point, we're trying to get the right data in front of the engineer. I don't think engineers ever go out with the intent of overspending, right? They're just, it's not a consideration in the day job. And so we're just basically making sure that the goals of both sides of those houses are understood at the time that those decisions are being made, in a way that they're informed with the right amount of data so that they can make good decisions and healthy decisions.
Yeah, you guys have 6 principles, right? If I remember. So one of them is everyone has to work together, some collaboration. People take personal ownership, take advantage of the variable cloud costs, make sure that decisions are value driven, the business decisions, build a centralized team, FinOps, and get to timely information and insights. I think that's what it was. There's six, something like that. When you think through those principles, right, there's also some steps that people can take in terms of maximizing the efficiency and high impact benefits of their cloud resources. What do you have to do? How do you get started? Because we're seeing a lot of people do some crazy things. We have people taking down their IO cost, used to be $1,000 a month to $1.69, right? I mean, they're getting there. It's pretty incredible, the percentage of efficiency that's coming from these FinOps teams.
Yeah, so I think you start with good planning, being proactive and thinking about the cost of what you're doing is. So if you're designing something new, thinking about that cost and calculating it out. And so this is where your billing data expert within the organization, someone who really understands how these things are priced and how to calculate them correctly, comes into things. and then start by designing lean and then growing into it. It's one of the things that you get from being in the cloud is that you can, start small and grow bigger as you need it. And then not everything needs to be built like a Porsche. You basically, you can sort of set some constraints. Like some of your services definitely are business critical and they need to be the highly redundant, highly performant. But there are services in your mix that are the tier 2 and tier 3 services that you should be designing to be having less redundancy in them and taking advantage of being able to be less expensive there because you don't actually need everything, every tick box ticked. And then just making sure you have those aligned expectations that when you're being asked to develop a feature, that also is understood that feature potentially has a cost involved. And so being aligned across the groups of what that looks like when this thing hits the ground in production. And then lastly, just validate that your assumptions to come to fruition, that you can't just throw it into production and then think, well, we did all the calculations ahead of time, so we don't need to look. You don't want to find out a couple of weeks later that it didn't quite pan out how you thought it was going to.
Mike, how long for a small mid-sized enterprise if they don't have a good cost model to develop one? Is it weeks? Can it be done within a quarter? As long as you have dedicated resources?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a misconception at the moment that you need this dedicated team in order to do FinOps. And reality is what we're trying to do is get maybe this virtual team for small organizations where you're picking someone in the engineering side, someone in the finance side, and you're bringing them together and having an intentional conversation around FinOps. And as your cloud footprint grows and the complexity of your cloud footprint grows, so in more teams, more different services deployed more globally, you're going to start to add more and more time to that conversation. And then just making sure that both sides are hearing each other as far as what they're goaling towards, and everyone understands who's taking responsibility for different elements. So, and I don't think you need to go from zero to hero overnight. You can start having very positive impact by just starting that conversation and deciding on a few things around efficiency day one. And over time, you'll see that grow and continue. We saw Adobe spoke at the FinOps X this year about how 10 years plus into their journey, they're still generating, large positive impacts that is actually driving their innovation. And so, this awesome. Doesn't have to happen, quickly and overnight. It can just constantly be being a positive influencer.
No, it makes a lot of sense. So it's both question to both of you. How are you guys working together? Putting Granica and FinOps together? Are you trying to solve a certain problem around data efficiency? Are you trying to solve something different from a cultural issue? So what's that partnership look like?
And can you tie it to your mission? Granica's mission is to increase the signal to noise ratio of information and thus make AI more accessible, more affordable, and safer to use. So can you tell us how your partnership is allowing you to live your mission?
So the foundation is all about enhancing the practitioner and helping them with their day job. And so we have these working groups that come together and help sort of capture the stories of success, the stories of failure, the best practices, if you will, of how to do and how to approach and how to think about, cost efficiency and cost in general for cloud. And so having the companies like Granica involved in those conversations means that we're getting not just the individual practitioner's point of view, but actually real good understanding of what opportunities are there, across the different tooling sets that are available to them. And so from the foundation's perspective, we're trying to align the thinking of the practitioner to the right direction and make it so that they understand what the pathway is to be doing good FinOps within an organization. And then we throw it over, I guess, with the vendors to take that conversation from, the theoretical and the guidance to actual real tactical things on the ground that they're working with their customers with.
Yeah, I think, one completely agree with Mike. One way that, I would say Granica is kind of influencing this notion of FinOps is primarily looking at the notion of, okay, what are the kind of current problems that enterprises are experiencing day to day? Right. And we're having, tens of conversations every single day with different sort of lines of businesses within a company and also across companies, across different verticals. Right. So we're able to, I would say, synthesize that information and figure out what are the kind of tangible solutions that Granica and companies like Granica can provide to the world. right? And then take those learnings, take those frameworks, if you will,
Yep.
and take those architectures, reference architectures, and flow that back to the community, right? So my sort of philosophy in terms of like partnering with FinOps Foundation is to basically just do that. Take the reference architectures, take the frameworks, give that back to the community, and the community will again kind of bless us back with respect to feedback and make our products better, so to speak, right? So at the end of the day, one quick anecdote or analogy that I want to take over here is if you really think about this news that has been making the rounds lately, right, where OpenAI apparently is spending around $700,000 or $1 million per day, and it's going to go bankrupt in like 2024 or whatever that might be. Who knows what the balance sheet looks like? Let Microsoft and themselves kind of take care of it. But if you really think about it, I would actually argue that $700,000 per day, depending on how crazy the traffic is, and if you're looking at OpenAI's ChatGPT as one of the fastest growing applications in the world in the last decade or so, right? I would say 700,000 is actually on the lowest ballpark. So one of the things that probably keeps OpenAI folks up at night is just cost efficiency per se. And one of the things that they usually look at, right, in terms of innovation is algorithmic innovation, right? So building great models, infrastructure innovation, so taking GPUs, TPU architectures. And then the third one, the most critical element is data itself, right? Data basically has gravity. It has the potential of actually influencing your future directions, which also means that you're collecting more and more data to actually make your models better. So data becomes a fundamental unit of AI, right? Because you're collecting more and more data, real world data per se, right? You also have to think about, is it actually solving the problem, which means that you're adding more simulation data. So AV companies, autonomous vehicle companies that we work with, right, can only drive so many miles per day. They rely on simulation data, and sometimes simulation data is factors more than real world data. So all of this is to basically say that data is a fundamental unit of AI, and how you do computing, that is going to be the fundamental problem as we sort of live in this age of computing. And the cost it takes for you to store the data, for you to access the data, for you to move the data becomes a very fundamental bottleneck, right? So that's where Granica is looking at, sort of looking at the data pre-processing layer and trying to figure out if you can focus on the fundamental unit of AI, fundamental unit of computing data itself, and if you can make the data itself much more better, higher quality, higher relevance, more valuable, then we could potentially influence AI abstraction of the AI, upstream to make it more accessible, affordable, and safe to use.
How much did the OpenAI announcement in November of last year change this reference architecture that you speak of? Did this generative AI storm that 59 days, 100 million users, and everybody in the enterprise now has a Gen AI strategy that's defining their roadmap? How much did that impact cloud storage solutions and the reference architecture that you and FinOps Foundation are sharing amongst the community?
Yeah, I think, again, kind of a fundamentalist point of view, I advocate strongly that before a company has an AI strategy, they need to have a data strategy, sure. Right? Sure. Before even thinking about LLMs and thinking about, POCs, around Gen AI, you really have to think about, okay, what is the data that I'm actually storing, right? Am I going to introduce any bias? Because remember, machine learning models, AI models are just average approximations, right? So if you have a lot of bias already in your data sets, then it's going to average across those biases and then produce results. That's what hallucinations and things of that nature come into play. Yeah. The second aspect of this is also privacy, right? If you really have a lot of sensitive data that you're storing behind the scenes, you cannot really use that for machine learning training or AI training in general. So what is your data privacy, a data protection sort of an angle? The third angle is, do I actually have enough data to begin with to solve the problem, to make, move the needle for my business, right? I just don't want to basically put something, in POC and realize that it's not going to scale to production, which is most of the sort of, stuff that is happening today, right? Most of the projects are in this POC scope. Everybody's super excited, but when you actually look at it solving real world problems when moving the needle for my business, it fails flat, right? So how do you look at, again, those scale, privacy, relevance to business? Those are the things that I would say companies have to look at. So, that's how we think about it, and that's how we advocate to the world.
So Rahul, that's an amazing.
I was just going to go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Rahul, I was going to say that's amazing perspective. I was going to go to Mike and say, well, how do we get started, and what do you measure, in terms of knowing how well you're doing? So Rahul's setting the benchmark. We're gonna all steal his template. We're gonna learn from him, right? And contribute back into the foundation, and then we're gonna be like, hey, how do we get started, and what do we measure on? So.
Yeah, so I spoke at FinOps X this year around education enablement programs being the sort of core key element that drives FinOps success within an organization. And the main thing there is just making sure that everybody understands what their role is in FinOps and what FinOps means for the organization. We've just recently published one of our working groups put out a FinOps asset on FinOps.org around KPIs, and so they've been collaborated together to come up with what are those measures, both looking at the measuring of the cloud efficiency itself, but also looking at measuring the effectiveness of your FinOps team within the organization. And so there's a handful of KPIs being published there with some thinking. And then on the FinOps framework itself, we have capabilities, and these are sort of areas of functional activity, and every one of those has a measure of success. And so combining both improvement in your measure of success on an individual capability with then seeing the impact that's having in those high level KPIs. It sort of echoes back on that everyone taking ownership of their cloud usage, that real success here is just making sure that everyone understands that they are the deciders of the company's expenditure when it comes to cloud, and then having them involved in the conversation and having them consider it to the conversation as they're making those decisions. And that basically we just want to get to a world where cost is just another metric for engineers, that it's just part of that design decision, part of that deployment considerations that's happening. And that we are seeing those conversations happen, that when a product leader is asking for a new feature, it comes with the conversation of cost. And when an engineer is implementing a feature, they can understand the constraints that they're meant to be operating within, and then they're targeting for that.
I love infinite open joins. Come on.
Well, no, I can tell you as a small cloud company that I work for, these discussions happen on a daily basis. And it's with our CTO, the highest level folks in our company. So it's now part of the rhythm of how we design and bring products and services to market. I'm wondering, and this is my final question, do you have a sense of, Mike or Rahul, what percentage of the Fortune 1000 have mature FinOps capabilities in place? And where do you see adoption of FinOps in the Fortune 2000 in the near future?
So I know that the stat that we have is, as far as participation in the FinOps Foundation, is 88% of the Fortune 50. At the recent FinOps X conference, I think we had 36 of the Fortune 50 in attendance at the conference. So, but I guess I'm looking at the wider, Fortune 2000 or even just companies at large. I think that FinOps in some shape or form for every organization just makes sense. Like, effectively, FinOps wasn't sort of invented in a vacuum. The way we went about it was we went to companies that had good success with cloud expenditure and went, what did you do? And what we realized was the sort of solution was quite often the same actual solution. And when you bring the people together to talk about what they've built, they're like, oh, we did the same thing. And so what FinOps is effectively the natural progression for an organization that has cloud expenditure. We just wanted to skip all of the potholes that everybody had to fall in order to realize they needed to implement a FinOps culture within their organization. So sort of basically pave the road and not nice and smooth and show the path so that companies can sort of naturally move into a space where they have good, FinOps cultures versus doing it as a reactive to all of the, potholes that you hit along the way.
Well done.
This is great. We're advancing the future of DevOps with a finance lens and activating a movement and community. We're here with Rahul Ponnala, co-founder and CEO of Granica, and Mike Fuller, CTO at the FinOps Foundation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Thank you. Love first principle mathematics applied to robust solutions, and the cost opportunities or efficiency opportunities are enormous. And you can now put those potential wasted expenses towards accelerating your innovation engine. Okay, we have this is our cleanup hitter spot where we bring big thinking, extraordinary guests to hit a grand slam, and there's no exception here. I'm going to introduce our next two guests. We have William Eggers, is the Executive Director of the Deloitte Center for Government Insights and a fellow at the National Academy of Public Administration. William is the author or co-author of numerous books, including Delivering on Digital, the Innovation and Technology that are Transforming Government, The Solution Revolution, and Washington Post bestseller, If We Can Put a Man on the Moon. William commentary has appeared in dozens of major media outlets, including New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post. He's here today with his co-author to talk about Bridgebuilders. You can follow William on Twitter at WD Eggers, EGGERS. Welcome, William, to DisrupTV.
It's so great to be with you today.
Thank you, sir. And William's co-author, we have Donald Kettl, author of Bridgebuilders. Donald is Professor Emeritus, former Dean of the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland, and a fellow at National Academy of Public Administration. Donald was previously the Sid Richardson Professor at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. He's dialing in from Austin today. Donald's books include, most recently, The Divided States of America and Can Governments Earn Our Trust? You can follow Don on Twitter at Don Kettl, DonKettl. Welcome, Don, to DisrupTV.
It's great to be with you here.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, we're really excited to have you. Given the current political environment, given the sense of gloom and doom, things that are unable to be done, right? This topic cannot be more timely. So how does bridge building factor into broader government reform initiatives, especially given that the extremes on both ends seem to have a dominance on the conversation, the mind share, and what's happening in the media? And, you know, no one ever gets excited about being a moderate. No, that never happens, right? So talk more about that.
You know, it's a tough one out there because people on the right and on the left end up spending so much time shooting at each other that they forget to spend time on making sure that what the people out there want is what they get. And the biggest problem that we see, and this is really why we wrote the book, is that the government programs are getting more and more and more complex, and that making them work involves more and more and more complex relationships. And that too often we tend to approach the process of delivering goods and services in ways that are obsolete. We tend to think about government as a kind of vending machine where we put the money in the top and push the button and wait for the services to come out the bottom, and then wonder why things don't work, because that's simply not the way that the whole machinery of government works any longer.
And I would just add to it, Ray, you know, Don and I have been in the business of improving government when you combine it for about 75 years now combined, and really focused on implementation. How do you get big things done in government? We've probably written dozens of books on that subject. And when you look at the national discourse, it's all about policy, or polarization. And there's just not enough attention focused on how do you solve these problems and how do you do the implementation. My good friend, and I'm sure you know her, Jen Pahlka, also has a new book out on decoding America, where she focuses on all that from a digital standpoint.
Yep.
And we're focusing broader. And if you really want to focus on actually getting big things done in government, the way government works today is not through kind of a siloed hierarchical approach. It's through these ecosystems, through these very complex networks. So how do you do that well? Whether it's dealing with the homelessness issue or climate action or broadband access, these are all through very complicated, sophisticated networks. And this book is about how do you actually do that? We supply over 100 different strategies. Both of us have worked on this topic for over 2 decades. And so we really think it fits the moment right now, whether it's you're looking at the fires in Maui, whether you're looking at the shortage of cancer drugs, the train derailment in Ohio, the migrant housing crisis. They're all really the same flavor or the same problem, which is how do you coordinate these very involved to realize a mission outcome?
Describe the title for us, Bridge Builders. I think Ray and I in the world of enterprise software are bridge building, but I'm not sure. Can you tell us? Clearly, you two are bridge builders with dozens of books and combined 70 plus years of experience helping improve government and government services. But who are bridge builders and what do they do?
Yeah, the core thing that we discovered at the very, very beginning, when we went out to look at what it is that actually works in terms of delivering high quality goods and services, is that we've got all these complex systems where there's no problem that any organization can control or manage any longer. It's kind of the basic proposition that we started with. There's no problem that matters that any one organization can control. So now what do you do? Wow. And the answer is that the solutions are there, but to make them work requires weaving the different elements, the different kinds of capacities, problem-solving abilities together from different organizations, sometimes different levels of government, sometimes different sectors of society, even sometimes different governments in different continents. And if to be able to do that, you need to find a way to bring those pieces together. So how does that work? And what we discovered is that it's very hard to hardwire those collaborations into place. But what you can do is to have people who are good at being able to make those kind of connections. And those are the people in the book that we explore as bridge builders, the people who are great at being able to bring together the different competencies and different organizations that are required to get the job done. Sometimes it's not the same set of competencies to deal with any problem, but it's a matter of trying to figure out how to get at it.
Sorry, Don.
Go ahead, William. William, you were saying?
So I'll give you a bridge builder who I'm sure both of you know quite well. Todd Park, very prominent player in Silicon Valley. After the healthcare opening the website, the disaster of it, we need to figure out how to do digital better and do procurement better. Put Todd Park on it, and Todd said, you know what we need to do is we need to bring the best minds from Silicon Valley, from Austin, Seattle, to looking at how we just from all over the country, including Mikey Dickerson, Jen Palka, his deputy CTO, and others, to really figure out how to do digital government better and build those bridges across the sectors, because with the acknowledgement that there's always more innovation outside an organization than inside of it. So how do we spin all that innovation into government, and how do we work across the sectors to do this better? And we have dozens of bridge builders in our book, going all the way back to Claire Barton and her work founding the American Red Cross. And what we need is not hundreds, thousands, but millions more of these individuals inside and outside government to really solve America's biggest challenges today.
The web is 30 years old, 1993. Who's the greatest bridge builder of the last 30 years? Do you have a ranking? Will you have the 2024 top 50 bridge builders?
Fame.
Forget about Thinkers 50. I want Don and William to create their own annual list of bridge builders so we can celebrate them. But
yeah, you run an award against that, have a scholarship,
But is there an agreement in terms of who do you think, who is the
organizations like the Problem Solvers Caucus, right? That could be a good one.
There's some of that, it's such a great question, but it's like asking us to choose among our children because we love them all. But one of the things that's fascinating here,
have more children.
But one of the things that's great is that it's not like there's just one or two. The deeper that we dug, the more that we found, and there's just a great collection of people. There are people like Thad Allen, who we may remember back in the days after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, and everybody was trying to figure out why can't we find a way to be able to solve the problem. And it turned out that the biggest problem that we had to solve was that the first phase was simply trying to solve the problem of the hurricane in New Orleans by trying to manage agencies. That just didn't work. We had to try to solve the problem for people. And Thad Allen came to the scene, was appointed by the president to be the chief response officer. He stood up on a desk the first morning he got there saying, you know what? I want you to treat everybody you encounter as if they were a member of your family. And if anybody gives you any guff, if anybody gives you any problem, I've got your back. I mean, that two things, and it just transformed the way in which things happened immediately at that point. Or you get back at the beginning stages of COVID, we had a problem trying to figure out what is this thing? How can we measure it? How fast is it spreading? And Beth Blower, who is a good friend of both of ours, who worked at Johns Hopkins University, was looking at the possibility of a trip to India, and she was hearing the story about this sort of weird disease that seemed to be sweeping the rounds. And so she was trying to figure out, is it safe to go? And instead of going, she said, I'm not so sure, but maybe I ought to stay home and find a way of measuring what's happening. And the Johns Hopkins website, which by the time it was finally closed down, had literally billions of hits to be able to track the spread of COVID around the world,
Wow.
was created by a person and a team that she was able to gather around her that helped us to try to measure what was happening and try to drive responses in ways that turned out to be incredibly effective.
Amazing.
And just there's a list of one person after another in all this that is just truly remarkable.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I love that idea of creating an annual list. There's so many lists that exist, but
this is a meaningful list. This is a meaningful list.
It's a really meaningful list, and I think we should do it. I want to just give a couple more names. Former Unilever CEO Paul Pullman.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Paul's in his new book, which we have the same editor at HBR, he played an absolutely pioneering role in getting the business community to focus more time and resources on sustainability when no one else was talking about that. We have former Houston Mayor Annalise Parker, who employed a bridge building model to organize Houston's battle against homelessness, which a decade later has reduced homelessness by 63% in Houston.
Wow.
At the same time where it was going up everywhere else around the country, including in San Francisco, Los Angeles.
And we're an unzoned city, and that makes that even more interesting, right? Yeah. There's no zoning in Houston. So.
No, and actually, I will say that helped because they were able to get 25,000 people into permanent housing, over 3/4 of whom were still there after a year. And because they didn't have zoning and a lot of restrictions and so on that you see in the San Francisco area, they're able to build more easily and more quickly than in many other cities around the country.
And let me add one nugget to that, which is really important, one fascinating nugget in Houston, and that is to be able to make this work, to be able to have that kind of dramatic reduction in homelessness. They brought together more than 100 different nonprofit organizations to be able to make things work. And so with just trying to do it in onesies and twosies would not have worked. 100 different organizations that were woven together as a team, and that's what really produced the results.
I recently found out that World Central Kitchen employs 70 people on their staff, but they can deliver 1 million meals a day. Amazing. So what Chef Jose Andres has done in terms of funding the local restaurants during disaster situations and paying local residents to be part of the solution in terms of delivering food at scale. I don't know if he would qualify for a bridge builder, but
absolutely,
I think of him as what an amazing distribution at scale beyond anything you could imagine. I think we've got
an organizing committee here for the award. We can do the general award. We'll do each one by industry, right? To kind of talk about it. You can do it by geography. Kind of like people have great places to work. We create.
This is one list. This is one list I would proudly promote all day, all night, because I can also sense the enthusiasm of two authors really passionately talking about these people. And that to me says a lot. Go ahead, Ray. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No. I think it's great. I think we should have that list, and a component of that list, I think, based on what I'm hearing and from the book that I kind of perused through, is the triple bottom line. So people that actually deliver on the triple bottom line would be one of the criteria, I think. So talk about the triple bottom line, what it is, why it's so important, and how it's impacting governments and public sector, and kind of the way PPPs are set up.
And I could start on that. So the triple bottom line, of course, is when companies are pursuing a triple bottom line of which they're seeking to maximize financial, social, and environmental benefits. And we now have, in 2020, the Business Roundtable released a new statement on the purpose of a corporation. 239 CEOs have committed to deliver long-term value to all their stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and shareholders. This is a huge change from back in the 1970s when people were really following the Milton Friedman maximum, which was essentially that the business of companies is really just to maximize shareholder value. And increasingly, they're looking at stakeholder value also. And internal pressure has also influenced everything from hiring practices to ethical supply chains. A recent Edelman study showed that employees at companies expect their employer to act on issues such as climate change, racism, and more of the embrace of such core values is increasingly important for, of course, Gen Z, millennials who want to find a job that advances their values alongside their pocketbook. And so what this means for government is that previously you had government nonprofits essentially focused on all of these societal problems. They didn't have a lot of help from business necessarily. And now you've got business heavily involved in this, investing hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars into trying to solve societal problems. You go through every Fortune 500 company, they'll have a number of their big issues that they're really focused on trying to solve right now and putting a lot of effort into it. So government now has another major player combined with foundations and academia to help them in this search for answers to society's biggest problems. We see this in climate change. Since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, we've seen hundreds of billions of dollars now in investment in clean energy. A lot of that might not have been there without the tax incentives and competitive grants and so on from IRA. But in the end, it's going to be for the private sector that's going to have to invest the majority of the money into reaching our climate goals.
And one of the things that's really important about this is that we've really advanced from the idea that somehow the government's just the master manipulator of all this, to the point where in a lot of cases it can be even the private sector creating public value. That the idea of the good old days, that there would be the sharp division between the public and the private. Actually, one of the things that Friedman would often try to promote is something that just doesn't work anymore, in part because it's very difficult to separate them if you wanted to. But if we didn't rely on that, we'd end up missing out on the tremendous opportunities and climate change and efforts to try to deal with providing better transportation services. If you look at what it's going to take to try to get somewhere on homelessness, case after case after case, we have either the government directing and trying to steer the services, or in other cases where the government's the junior partner and a large part of the leadership is coming from the private sector, which we think is terrific. What we really have is a focus on trying to figure out how we can try to improve the quality of life of citizens around the country and around the world, and understand that it's finding ways of weaving these different pieces together that are the keys to success.
Yeah, my company's founder for the last decade has talked about business being the greatest platform for change and stakeholder capitalism. It's all about trust and generosity. You talk about government agencies gaining greater citizen trust and ways perhaps they can measure trust. Can you talk about the importance of trust, and how can we, in the spirit of radical transparency, measure trust and outcomes to gain more advocacy from citizens?
Yeah, that's such a great and a critical question, because if there's anything that we've discovered is one of the big problems in governments, not just in the US, but around the world, it's something that international organizations have focused on. It's the fact that we don't have sufficient trust in public institutions. And in fact, there was a survey a couple of years ago that the Washington Post did, and it turned out that Congress was less popular than head lice. Literally the case in the survey, believe it or not.
Or one for head lice.
But the challenge of trying to figure out what do you do? And it's going to be really hard to get people to change their minds about Congress. But it turns out that at the retail level, at the way in which people connect day by day, bit by bit, they may not trust government as a whole, but if they get that Social Security check, if they call for the fire department to arrive and they come and act effectively, if it turns out that they want to try to make sure that pothole gets filled, the kinds of things that they care about, if you make that work effectively, understand that the keys to success are developing the partnerships that are required to produce the results that we want, then bit by bit at the retail level, it's possible brick by brick to be able to rebuild trust. And that's what we think is ultimately most important, not only because it can provide satisfaction to the people about the services that they're getting and the money that they're spending, but also we think that really the only way you can rebuild trust in government and the broader governmental institutions more broadly.
Don,
And
that makes a lot of sense.
let me just go back a little bit to the societal impact and the private sector, and just give an example of a partnership that Deloitte and Salesforce have around workforce development. So in 2018, Deloitte and Salesforce teamed up to create something called the Pathfinder program. It's a workforce development program centered around the vision that all individuals, regardless of background or academic status, could have access to the skills and support necessary to support all the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution. And if you go out on LinkedIn and so on, there's always a shortage of Salesforce developers and engineers and so on. And so what we did was we teamed up to create a free immersive training program with over 200 hours of training and learning. So anyone can learn in-demand skills, earn Salesforce credentials, make connections with the Trailblazer community, pursue Salesforce ecosystem jobs as administrators, developers, analysts, and so on. They don't have to have a university degree. They just need to have these skills. And we've teamed up with a community college to do that. It's now taking place also in the US and the UK. And Deloitte and others will hire those individuals right out of the program. Awesome. And so this is all privately funded. Yep. And you're getting people into great paying jobs with a lot of upward mobility involved in them. But it was created by the private sector, but is producing a lot of public value because it's getting people into these jobs of the present and the future in a new way that wasn't simply possible before. So it's a great micro example of where the private sector can produce public value. And it's also helps both of our bottom lines because the great demand for more people with these Salesforce skills in the economy.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. Models like Multiverse as well. They do that as well, taking advantage of those job training programs are creating that. I was going to say something snarky from Don's comment, like the K Street lobbyist approach would have been to denigrate head rights even more and drive everything down. So we definitely don't want to do that as well. But we are here with William Eggers and Donald Kettl, authors of Bridgebuilders. It's a good guide and blueprint as to how we can actually bring everybody closer together and actually solve real world problems. You can catch the book on Amazon. And I think it came out in May 2023. So congratulations on the book.
Congratulations on the book. Thank you so much.
See you in the green room.
Cheers. I love the title, Bridge Builders. And I have a 20-year-old who's at a rising junior, so second half of her undergraduate years studies. And I wonder if we're teaching bridge building skills at universities. Are we teaching, self-awareness, critical thinking, generosity, empathy, and ability to think about societal issues and how what they're studying can help contribute to better neighborhoods, better communities? I hope they are.
I hope they are too. I have the same thing. I have a rising junior in school, and I think the challenges he sees is that there isn't a lot of critical thinking on campuses today. There's not a lot of people aren't allowed to say what they want to talk about or have debates or get engaged in debates, and I think you need that for bridge building to happen, right? To have a good level of discourse and argument, understanding people's different views and what different sides are. So hopefully those things are
certainly tolerance and stick-to-itiveness, grit. I mean, some
hustle is useful. So.
Yeah, when you're tackling, for example, the issue of homelessness, this is not you don't have a silver bullet. There's no light switch. It's
not just a housing issue. It's a mental health issue. It's a jobs issue. It's a drug treatment issue. There's so many different aspects of that. I mean, it's crazy. So there are multifaceted problems that really require people to come together and work together across different perspectives.
Systems thinking, complexity theories. I mean, there's so many process design. There's so many things you have to you have to learn and experience before you can, I think, be an effective bridge builder. But I got to tell you, our last two guests, you could tell they were super passionate.
Yes.
So I guess one of the key ingredients in this recipe of bridge building is, man, you better love what you do. because these are hairy, ugly, difficult problems. And as a bridge builder, if you don't have that mental toughness, mental, physical, just toughness, I don't know how you can effectively be a bridge builder for long. It could be a very short career if you don't have that, if you don't put in the reps at the gym and get ready for what's ahead of you. Can you summarize the show in a minute for us with our 4 guests today?
You know what? I think we're talking about massive movements in each one of these shows. We had the cloud revolution, and in the cloud revolution, what we saw was really this rush to get onto the cloud without a lot of thinking, a lot of organization, a lot of structure. And so we've got a lot of stuff in the cloud without a systems approach or systems thinking. And really what we think about in the FinOps revolution is really that alignment between technology, business, and value. And I think those things are important to actually create, some good, right? You don't want to waste energy. You want to waste money. You want to get a good benefit. You want to get business results. And these are these triple wins that people talk about. Well, the same thing's happening in our next set of guests as well. They were talking about, William and Donald were talking about how it's really important to actually create those win-win-wins. And, the same thing has to be applied, right? You're looking for outcomes that people can work towards. And some of them are disparate, just like in IT. Business and IT typically are at loggerheads. They have to work together to get something to happen. Well, the public sector, government itself has to work with private sector to actually achieve goals. And sometimes there are philanthropies along the way that create those opportunities. Bridge building is not an easy art. It's something that requires a lot of fortitude, as you're talking about. And I think that fortitude is very, very important. And so I think it's great to see examples what those heroes are. I hope we create a list at some point. I think that would be pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to the Deloitte 2024 Bridge Builders 50.
Bridge Builders 50. I think that would be awesome. It's starting.
It might have to be 100. I don't know. They named a lot of people.
Might be one for each country, right? At what they're going. So they're global.
I am sure they would be bridge builders representing all geographies, all sectors. And I think it would be probably.
We could start small with 50. I think they'd probably get to get there. It'd be a good place to go. But hey, I think in each one of these, it's really about that notion of these are complex problems, and when you bring teams together, we get a lot of success. So. For sure. Okay, well, next week we have an incredible roster. We have Kristen Frontenrose, president at Red 6 International. We have Dr. Daniel Ragsdale, Department of Defense Cyber Tech Security expert. And we have Dr. David Bray, Distinguished Fellow, Stimson Center and Business Executive for National Security. For those of you who watch the show regularly, Dr. Bray is one of our biggest minds that join us on a fairly regular basis to keep us in tune in terms of, again, big, audacious issues that we're trying to solve. So if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. We'll see you next Friday. Bye, everyone. Happy Friday, everyone.